If you're at all familiar with the simulation hypothesis, you'll know some big names are proponents. People like Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson will use an argument along the lines of, in 1825, Joseph Nice took the first permanent photograph. Less than 200 years later, we have realistic 3D simulations with billions of particles and millions of people doing random, novel actions, all at the same time. And we're at the dawn of immersive technology. Virtual reality, for example. If we continue progressing, it's thought, we'll eventually create perfect simulations of reality, and it's more likely than not that we're one of those simulations, rather than the original human race. And here's why. Nick Bostrom, the progenitor of this simulation hypothesis, proposes a trilemma, wherein at least one of the following propositions is true. 1. Human civilizations almost certainly go extinct before reaching technological maturity as post-human civilizations. 2. Post-human civilizations almost certainly choose not to run a significant number of simulations of their evolutionary history, what Bostrom calls ancestor simulations, or variations thereof. 3. Or we are almost certainly living in a simulation. If post-human civilizations are capable of simulating environments and minds indiscernible to the Sims, and 1 and 2 are false, then, simply put, some human civilizations become post-human, some post-human civilizations are interested in running many simulations. Those simulations have hundreds of billions of simulated minds. It follows then that the overwhelming majority of consciousness is simulated, and thus, it's more likely than not that we're one of those hundreds of billions, rather than the original simulators. While yes, Bostrom asserts that the computational power of such civilization would be astronomical, their simulation need not simulate every atom or have every aspect of reality for the simulated minds to not notice any irregularities. Read Bostrom's full essay on the argument. Of course, we don't know whether or not we will or even can reach post-humanity. Only time will tell. But given our current technological capabilities and foreseeable technological developments within the next 30 to 50 years, what could we create that would count as an early, rudimentary ancestor simulation? And what would it mean for the simulation hypothesis? I propose the Tesseract, a 3D virtual reality memory reconstruction system. If you've seen the movie Interstellar, you'll be familiar with the black hole Tesseract sequence, where Cooper is able to travel through time and communicate with Murph in the past. A fantastic sequence, no doubt. In it, we have time. Cooper is able to see the time zones. We have space. Cooper is able to move around and physically go to a time zone. And we have interaction. Cooper is able to interact with past time zones. The time zone Cooper chooses to go to is connected to prior events in a timeline. The timeline is where we start. As a video editor, I work on a lot of projects, but it was only when working on a project called The Hand of God that it first dawned on me that when looking at a project's timeline, I could see time, in some sense, the way God sees it. At a glance, I could see the video's beginning and ending simultaneously, and everything in between. This got me thinking, what other universes could I see at a glance? The Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Bond universe, the Harry Potter universe, the Lord of the Rings universe, the Star Wars universe, the multiverse. Though you'd be able to throw on your headset, boot up the Tesseract, and enter into these reconstructed cinematic universes, being Cooper in them, and moving and interacting, we'll take Bostrom's notion of ancestor simulations, and focus on reconstructing and being Cooper for our own past timeline. Though I have more recorded memories from my childhood than my grandpa or his grandpa, a child born in the 21st century, and really from the 2010s on, have their childhood recorded ubiquitously. Due to the explosion of camera technology within the last few decades, it's never been easier to consistently, at high quality, capture moments. A child born today has a fuller, more intricate, and higher quality memory cache than those past. And here lies our entry point into the Tesseract. The Tesseract is composed of timelines. Timelines are composed of time zones, and time zones are composed of memories. The Tesseract would initially work off of two types: recorded memories, photos and videos of time zones, and natural memories, past time zones you remember, including those not recorded. I should stop here to explain why I'm using the phrase time zones, given that the Tesseract in its final form will not only contain fully fleshed out memory reconstructions, but also fully fleshed out alterations of those memories. One would use a timestamp containing timeline, location, year, month, day, hour, minute information to jump to a specific memory. The time zone provides the user with specific start, end, location, and timeline information for the memory in question. So how do we go from this 2D memory to a virtual 3D interactive time zone? First, we need to reconstruct the memory's environment and people in 3D. Then we need to figure out a way to interact authentically with said environment and people. First and foremost, the Tesseract needs a base and framework to work off of. For the base, we'll work off of various game, modeling, and animation engines and softwares that can give us the best graphics, physics, and animations currently available. Unity, CryEngine, Frostbite, Houdini, Cinema 4D, Maya, for example. Of course, in the future, the Tesseract will have its own engine. The framework, the glue that binds all of the Tesseract's technologies together, is artificial intelligence. AI will permeate every nook and cranny of each time zone's environment, people, and objects. Player perception will also depend heavily on AI. The Tesseract's environments, for now, will be the highest quality part of a reconstruction. We see with the current state of CGI that environments are lifelike. Marvel's CGI is obvious. It's this CGI that will sell the Tesseract's environments. For people, we're still stuck in the uncanny valley, but the industry has improved leaps and bounds over the last 2 decades. Imagine where we'll be in a few more. Though this initial reconstruction will feel like an all-encompassing uncanny valley with its aberrations, we're back in 2017 at Truman's graduation party. Now let's take this single memory reconstruction and turn it into a time zone. With point cloud reconstruction, Facebook has been able to do something to this effect. They've created a virtual 3D environment from flat videos. Of course, we want to go deeper. Remember, a time zone is also an amalgamation of all pertinent memories regarding an overarching memory. In our case, Truman's graduation party is the overarching memory, which encapsulates a myriad of other memories. The Tesseract will gather all of my memories regarding the party, the location of the party, Truman, and all of the guests to reconstruct in a consistent sequence the overarching memory, and thus the time zone of Truman's graduation party. Currently, this time zone is bare bones. We have visual blank spots and other aberrations all around, and we're merely ghosts observing a memory past in an all-encompassing, uncanny valley. This valley, caused by current technological limitations aside, leaves us with 4 hurdles to overcome. The first one, how do we physically interact with the environment and people? 2, how do we completely fill in all visual blank spots and aberrations? The third one, how do we organically introduce novel stimulus? And lastly, how do we produce authentic reactions to novel stimulus? Hurdle 1 is simple to solve. With haptic technology, we can bring physical interaction into the sim. With haptic gloves, we can give ourselves the sensation of touch, and we'll be able to interact with people, the environment, and objects in the simulation. If our time zone is cold, then our haptic suit will reflect that. If we're in a hot environment, the suit adjusts accordingly. If a person bumps into you, or a gust of wind hits, you'll feel that too. Though we're still observers, we're now a physical presence in the time zone, able to interact with the simulation. Hurdles 2, 3, and 4 are interlinked. and solved with the same technologies: deepfakes, memory extraction, and, chief among them, data. We'll talk about memory extraction later. Say for example I grab someone by the arm. They only have one animation sequence, as per how that memory played out in the past. This will either cause the entire simulation to freeze until I let go, or the simulation will continue around us, and once I let go, they'll teleport to their next beat in the sequence. Solving the event flow problem will not only smooth out novel stimulus and simulations, but also take us from being physically present observers to physically present participants in the time zone, adding new stimulus to the simulation. So, I grab their arm. Two things can now happen. One, the simulation adapts to this new stimulus organically, and once the stimulus is finished, the simulation organically gets back to the original memory sequence. Here, the stimulus was merely a bump in the flow of time. The second thing that can happen is any significant deviation, we might say, from the original sequence creates a new alternative timeline. The Tesseract gains its multitude of timelines once our effect in the simulation, instead of being a bump in time, ripples across the timeline. Here, we become Cooper. Remember that all of the current artifacts in the environment, people, objects, and individual memories are a result of the Tesseract having access to only my memories and personal data. Gathering all of the other guests' memories and personal data concerning the party and applying that to the reconstruction will fill in any visual artifacts existing before or because of novel stimulus found across the time zone. The Tesseract's deepfake system will now have access to a plethora of data concerning each guest's face, body, and voice. All simulated people will have full 3D models and voice generation of themselves. Here's Al Pacino on Conan and Tom Cruise on Letterman while Joe Rogan talks about his new chimp hockey team.
Friends, I've got something new to tell all of you. I've decided to sponsor a hockey team made up entirely of chimps. I'm tired of people telling me that chimps are not capable of kicking human ass in sports.
With the current state of deepfakes, if not told otherwise, one might think them real. Al Pacino and Tom Cruise are really Bill Hader, and Joe's voice is a computer. This is a machine learning dataset of Tom Cruise's face by the YouTube channel Control-Shift-Face. Here, the AI is learning Cruise's face from all angles, using thousands of gathered images. Imagine the same process, but for your face, using your data. The question now is, how do we get organic adaptation, organic action, to novel stimulus to be authentic to who the people really are? Bill Hader looks like Tom Cruise, but what sells this bit is Hader's impression. Cruise's voice and mannerisms are as essential to himself as is his face. This issue of authenticity is primarily solved with data. If we collected 5 smartphones from 5 different people from all walks of life, we'd have a silhouette of who they are. The information, calls made, things searched, things watched, photos and videos taken, shopping habits, etc. Their data provides us with their digital footprint. In the digital realm, one's data is likened to oneself. As time goes on, with greater sophistication in data technology reaching greater breadth and depth, the Tesseract's AI will be able to color in said digital silhouettes, fine-tuning each to who the person really is. All of our facial expressions, our mannerisms, our voices, our reactions to certain things, our relationship and conversation dynamics, both in video and across text, registered in those vast catalogs at the disposal of the Tesseract and its technologies. Indeed, here the AI gathers its base to generate authentic reactions to novel stimulus. What started as flat people and enclosed memories long gone are now 3D virtual people with potential. In due time, both the visual and action components of a simulation will cross the uncanny valley. To fill out a person's data cache, we might also use memory extraction. Using external stimulus, MIT researchers in 2015 were able to bring back seemingly lost memories in rats. Researchers in Japan have also prototyped technology that reconstructs images from brain activity and memories. If the Tesseract before only had access to memories and data contingent on us remembering and using them, the Tesseract now has access to all memories and data outright. Again, apply this new data to the reconstruction, and we have completed our time zone. Using these same processes to reconstruct other time zones, and coding a means to go from one time zone to the next, we can exhaust all of ours and other people's memories and data, filling in our origin timeline. Having authentic simulations of each person in the time zone, we can introduce novel stimulus that spawn alternative timelines. The more consolidated memory and data the AI has, the more rigorous the memory reconstruction, the greater the time zone's fidelity, the truer to life the timelines, the deeper the simulation. We now have our origin timeline and its alternatives, the Tesseract.
Alright, Smith, boot up the next simulation.
Because the simulations will have a sort of consciousness to adapt to novel stimulus, and the Tesseract will have millions of simulated minds across its timelines, the Tesseract will have no shortage of sims to learn from and refine its consciousness simulation. Each timeline provides a different angle of Truman's mind. The Tesseract can then use each of these to fill in Truman's summa consciousness. As the Tesseract continues to refine its consciousness simulation, the simulated minds further from the origin timeline will be, in theory, closer to reality than those closest to actual reality. Deeper consciousness, deeper down. Simulated Truman has experienced innumerable more things and their variations than biological Truman. Does this mean that the Tesseract knows more about Truman than the real biological Truman? And this is where we circle back to Bostrom's simulation hypothesis. When I'm in this time zone, on the origin timeline in my Tesseract, does Truman in this time zone know he's only a simulation? What about all of these other Trumans, or all of my simulations across these timelines? And what about Zhang Zhou's Tesseract? Does Truman in his Tesseract in this time zone, who just got his hands on his own memory reconstruction device, know he's a simulation? If each Tesseract can have thousands of alternative timelines, then what are the chances that I'm the biological original and not a simulated alternative, spawned by stimulus from the original simulated past?